Hey, so welcome everybody to today's webinar on technology solutions for those with little or no functional vision. My name's Rebecca Clark and our presenters today will be Peter Cracknell, who is our vision technology specialist based in Brisbane here for Quantum, and he's also manager of our Queensland office. We also have Daniel Keogh, who's our Access Technology Support Specialist and does our software support and a lot of the training with software, particularly for our customers. So the idea of today is for anyone that either has little or no functional vision themselves or is supporting people with no or little functional vision, to give you an idea of the how you might be able to manage different daily tasks or do things in the workplace, such as access your emails, access paper documents, and how you might go about that. So first of all, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the lands from which this webinar is being presented and pay our respects to any elders past, present or emerging. And for me, that's the people of the Darug country here in New South Wales. So just a bit of webinar housekeeping for anyone that might not have attended one of our webinars before. Your microphone will be muted during the webinar, but we will have time for questions at the end. If you do have any questions, we would prefer if you can put them in either the Q&A area, which you can tab to in Zoom, or use Alt+H and use the chat area, or that's Command H if you're a Mac user, or you can tap on the chat bubble. If you have any technical difficulties, please also use the chat area and we'll monitor that. And we are recording the webinar and we'll make that available afterwards. And we have also enabled live captions for anyone that needs them. So that can be tabbed to, and it just says live transcription. It is automated, so I'm not sure of how accurate it is, but we can edit that in the recording as well. So just a bit of an overview of today's session. So after a bit of this introduction, we'll have Peter Cracknell, who will be presenting any tips. He's going to give a bit of a demo and overview of technology that's available for in this area. So including tips for transitioning to using speech feedback for people whose vision may be deteriorating or have had sudden vision loss. We'll talk about the use of refreshable Braille displays, text-to-speech devices, and also a bit about tactile graphics and how they can assist people. And then we have Daniel Keogh, who will talk a bit personally about his experience using this kind of technology and how he uses it in the workplace. And we will then have a question and answer session. So over to you, Peter.
Having shots are not good, but
okay.
Yeah, thank you, Beck. And I recognise, of course, a lot of people on this webinar won't have sight and won't be able to see what's on the screen. So I'll try and describe as much as I can as I'm going through this presentation. So thank you, Beck. As you were mentioning, the focus of this webinar will be on accessibility for people with limited functional vision or no vision. In other webinars, we've talked about magnification techniques for magnifying close and distant materials. But in this webinar, we're going to be mainly focusing on speech output and Braille output and other aspects that will benefit blind people, mainly in the workplace environment, but also in education as well. And on that point, I think it's very important that there is a fairly smooth transition from the education environment to the work environment so that the technologies match. In the workplace, most work environments use Microsoft Windows as their operating system. So it's very important that students do acquire the skills with Windows accessibility as they transition into the workforce. Of course, that's not to say they may not have other skills with the Mac platform. We often see people who use Mac and Windows, and obviously that's to be encouraged. It's also, and I'm not going to really talk today much about iPhones or iPads, though of course, once again, those are very much a very important part of the technology that people use in their day-to-day lives. And hopefully if we get Danny online, he can talk to that as well. Today, mainly we'll be looking at the sorts of everyday access to work systems and the kind of technology that can help with that. So, Rebecca, you mentioned that I was going to be talking a little bit about some of the issues that people have if they have progressive vision loss. People who are perhaps losing a lot of sight over time. And I'd like to start with that because it's an area we see quite a lot of issues with. This is particularly common for people with retinitis pigmentosa, which often will really start to affect people in their 20s, 30s and 40s. And we often see people who have very good functional vision as a young person and manage to go through school quite successfully, but then about 10 years into their work, their vision will decline quite significantly. It's very important that people allow time to acquire new skills with audio output rather than visual output in that process. So if people have time to acquire those skills, practice and invest in those skills, I think that will be a very important investment should their vision get worse down the track. There are, of course, many people who have a sudden injury that will cause blindness, and they will have a very steep curve moving from a vision-based access to computers and so on to an audio and keyboard-based. So what we often see in the workplace is people who will start with magnification techniques and large print keyboards. So this is an example of a large print keyboard. As you can see, high contrast lettering on with large letters on a high contrast background. And yellow and black, as this one is quite a popular combination. We also have white and black as well, depending on what people feel comfortable with. These keyboards were designed to help people who are not proficient touch typists to identify the keys. We do encourage people very strongly at any stage, or indeed with perfect vision, to become touch typists. It's going to be such a huge advantage to people if they do get progressive or sudden vision loss, if they are able to touch type. And the other thing we'll see for people who, as I say, they will start with low vision and will progress to no vision, is that they will often be using programs like Zoomtext to magnify. And I'm going to turn the camera on to a typical computer screen here. Rebecca, if you can tell me if I'm getting the angles
right. Yes. Yep. Yeah, that's okay.
Should I get a bit closer?
If you can.
Okay, so I'm not sharing the screen here. I'm just showing the screen here. And the reason is, at the moment, I'm not magnifying this computer screen. And with the Zoomtext program, what people will do is they will magnify. And are you able to see that magnified a bit now, Rebecca? On the screen?
Yes, I can. Yes. Yeah.
So what you're now seeing on the screen, for those of you that can see the screen, is Zoomtext magnifying everything on my laptop screen, including the mouse pointer, and including the actual text that I'm typing in Microsoft Word. And for many people, this is the solution for their access in the workplace environment, to magnify all of their regular Microsoft Office programs, email, Word, Excel, and so on, and whatever other systems that the employer is using, which can be customer management systems, it can be roster systems, it can be inventory systems, and so on. And the Zoomtext program can magnify the whole of the screen. The problem occurs for people with progressive vision loss is that they need to increase the magnification to very, very large amounts, where we can only really fit 1 or 2 words on the screen. And it is easy to lose our place with a slight mouse movement, which I'm going to do now. So as I move around now, I can easily lose my place and have no idea where I am on the screen. So when people are increasing their magnification all the time, we would normally recommend that they start to do 2 things. 1, switch on any speech output that comes with Zoomtext. And 2, start to become less dependent on the mouse and to use the keyboard more. So for example, I'll give an example where we use the mouse to move to the start menu, and I'm going to move to the left and down to the bottom of the screen, and I can find the start icon there. Now that process is quite difficult at this kind of magnification. It's so easy to lose your place. It's much easier to simply press the Windows key on the keyboard and go straight to that position. So what we're learning here is some simple keyboard techniques for controlling the computer and not relying on the mouse. These keyboard techniques for like the Windows key, the Tab key, the Alt key, and various combinations, you can actually control the whole of Windows and Word and Outlook just using those combinations. But you do need to invest time in learning those techniques. It's not difficult, it just takes time, and it takes also a conscious effort to not use the mouse. And the way that we often recommend that people do this is to set aside time every day in their working day to only use the keyboard to do their work tasks. I know the temptation is there to grab the mouse because that's the way that people have always done it, to click on a print icon, to click on a send in email, that sort of thing. But what we encourage people to do is to invest half an hour every day to do it what may seem like the long way round, but which will become the short way round in time. So though you'll find sticking points where you just don't know how to find the print icon, you can actually learn the means of navigating to that part of the screen and activating the print icon. Now, there are many ways of getting help with this. You can actually get help from adaptive technology specialists from various organisations, including Quantum and Vision Australia, Guide Dogs, and so on. And these are people that are specialised in teaching people these transitionary skills. You can also get a lot of help from the various training materials that are available from Freedom Scientific. There are YouTube clips, there are documentation that can help people to learn the means to operate computers, Windows computers, with the keyboard only. So we'll often see people who are using Zoomtext at very high magnifications. Our trigger point would be around about 8 times magnification. So at the moment I'm running at, I'm just going to see what I'm running at here. This is probably around about 8 times magnification here. At this point, it is too difficult really to operate productively. So instead, we would start to recommend that people use a program called Zoomtext Fusion. Now, Zoomtext Fusion is a combination program that combines Zoomtext and the JAWS program. So when we run Fusion, we're running both the magnification and the enhancements to the pointer and so on, and the JAWS program providing the speech and some of the navigation shortcuts and so on. This way, people can transition, if they know they're going to have loss of vision, from mouse-based techniques to audio techniques. And hopefully they will have learned sufficient audio techniques and audio navigation to eventually use JAWS primarily, the speech component, rather than magnification. So the JAWS program does not have any screen enhancements whatsoever. I'm going to leave the screen enhancements on here just so that you can actually see, for those of you that can see, the effect of some of the magnification techniques, sorry, some of the JAWS techniques. So I'm going to just restart that. Bear with me a moment while I restart that. It's been around for 30 years and has been a primary access technology for blind people in the workforce and in education too. It's highly developed now and has had to be highly developed to cope with all the changes in Windows over the years. It is the primary screen reader throughout the world. There are other screen readers too. There's a free one called NVDA, which is very popular. And Windows has got the Windows Narrator as well, which is built into Windows. They don't have quite all of the sophistication of the JAWS program. And when I say that, you don't have to use the JAWS program in a sophisticated way. You can use it in quite a simple way too, but it can cope with sophisticated programs like Excel, PowerPoint, Internet, Chrome, browser, and so on. And that's really where the benefit comes, is that the JAWS program is taking care of those complex changing environments, constantly keeping up with those complex changing environments. So I'm just going to log in here. So this is why we see it as the primary screen reader in the workplace. It can be purchased either through NDIS directly or through the Job Access Scheme, as can any of the technology that we're talking about today. Rebecca, would you mind if I just hand it back to you for a moment so that you could talk a little bit about the Job Access Scheme and how that operates for people in the workplace?
Yes, certainly. So let me just unpin. So yes, so with the Job Access, that allows you to, if you're in work, then it's a government scheme whereby you can get funding for any equipment or even training you might, or I think it also there's some options for training with colleagues to help them, you know, if they need help with learning more about vision impairment. So what happens is you can, or your employer or together can put in an application. They send out an assessor and go through the kind of task that you're trying to do and work out, you know, if there's different technology that might help. So it's very individualized, and it means, you know, that's the government funding that. So employers don't have to purchase equipment themselves, or you as the employee don't have to, you know, you're not out of pocket trying to get equipment to help you in the workplace. So that's they've got a 1-800 number, and it's jobaccess.gov.au, and it's called the Employee Assistance Scheme, as far as I know. And yeah, we do now have Danny on the line, but he's only been able to join by phone. So, but we'll let him chat to us later. But yeah, I'll just see if I can find that 1-800 number for people. So yeah, so And I think, you know, there's certain criteria about number of hours of work, and it's also included as if you're self-employed as well. So it's 1-800-464-800. And if you've got an idea of the sorts of things you need, I think that there is an online form you could complete, but otherwise you can work with your employer or, you know, disability employment service for that. So yeah, great. So
yes,
yeah,
okay.
so that's a really good option for people.
Yes, we can help there as well, because we often get invited into workplaces, often government departments or corporate environments, to advise on the technology that might help people to perform their job better, keep their job, or advance in their career. And we can actually trial equipment and software in those environments, just so that we can arrive at the right recommendation, so that when job access are actually assessing the situation in the workplace, the employee will be able to demonstrate that, that the equipment's going to help them to perform their tasks.
Yes, yeah. So.
Okay, so what we might do, I know Danny is not able to share a screen or anything like that, but what we might do is, if Danny can talk a little bit about how he uses technology, and at various points, Danny, if you wish me to demonstrate that, I can demonstrate some of that equipment on my computers here. Do we have Danny on the line now?
I think we do. Yep. I think Danny on. I'll see if I can unmute you. Is that Danny there?
So whilst we're trying to get Danny on the line, I'm just going to give a little bit of background. So Danny Keogh has been with us for 18 years, I think, and he's our software support and technology advisor based in Melbourne. Danny has masses of experience with the JAWS program and other technologies too. He also uses a Braille display, and Danny provides us with, and our customers, with support about computer access to Windows using the JAWS program and other programs. Danny uses this equipment himself, of course, which was largely provided through the job access scheme, as we mentioned before.
Yeah, so
turn the camera on some of the other equipment that we typically use. So what we have here in front of the camera is a Braille display called the Focus 40 Braille display with 40 characters of electronic Braille, connected into a laptop computer called the L Braille. It is a Windows laptop, quite compact. I have just got it connected to a computer screen here as well, just for the benefit that so people can see what is actually on the laptop computer. So at the moment, for those of you who can see, we've got an HDMI connection from the L Braille to a computer monitor. Now, of course, a blind Braille user would not need the computer monitor, and that's the whole advantage of carrying the L Braille, is that it doesn't require a screen or anything like that. It doesn't even require a QWERTY keyboard, but you can attach one, because instead you can operate the whole of the laptop just using the various Braille keys that are positioned around the Braille display. So, for example, if I want to go to the Start menu, I can press a combination of keys and it will actually go to the Start menu, and I can navigate just using some of the various combinations on the Braille display throughout the Windows environment. In the meantime, I am reading the Braille with my finger on the Braille line at the bottom here. This Braille display can be detached and used separately as purely as a Braille display. Now, there's no actual computer in the Focus 40. It is just a Braille display. It's a means of reading Braille from a computer and also typing back in using the keys on the Braille display. So this is a very popular means that many blind people use in the workplace to give them better access to their computers. And what I mean by better access is complementing the audio output from JAWS by providing the Braille output that's of the item that's in focus on the computer at the time. And the reason that is very important, the number of reasons, is primarily for precision. So when you're listening to a computer, perhaps an email or a document, oftentimes you need a lot of precision. You need to make sure that everything's spelled correctly, that you're using the correct sense of the word. And with audio, sometimes that's difficult to be sure, because many words in English sound the same, but actually have different meaning. So with a Braille display, you can actually see precisely what words are on the line, and you can then immediately correct them by bringing the cursor, by typing a cursor routing button to that point, and you can immediately correct the word. So that precision is very important. Also, when you're looking at a lot of figures, or especially things with a lot of jargon or programming type codes, again, for that precision, the Braille is superior than trying to listen to everything. That's not to say that people don't generally listen. For the majority of the work, people will listen to the JAWS speaking, often at very high rates. I'm sure some of the rates of speech that blind people use are incomprehensible to most of us. But the reason, of course, that they have those speech rates so high is to get through the material as rapidly as possible. Now, a second very important use of a Braille display is when you're in a presentation or a meeting and you don't want to be listening to JAWS rabbiting away in your earpiece, because you're trying to concentrate on the conversation in the meeting, or you're giving a presentation. This way, you can connect your Focus Braille display. It doesn't have to be a big one like this. It could be a smaller Focus 14 with 14 cells of Braille, which is much more compact. And because it's connected via Bluetooth to your device, and your device could be an iPhone or it could be a computer, your meeting notes could be on the computer, the laptop, or on your iPhone, and you would be reading in Braille those notes, the agenda and so on, whilst at the same time participating in the conversation. And that makes for a much more natural interaction with your colleagues. You're not distracted by speech in your ear. You're actually purely focused auditorily on your colleagues and the conversation, but you are referring to meeting notes and documentation with your Braille display. Braille it's an excellent medium for the workplace and for study too, but not everybody reads Braille. In fact, the majority of blind people do not read Braille. And especially those who who acquire vision loss later in life, it's difficult to learn Braille to touch and to understand the code, though we strongly encourage people to do that. In school, it's often a decision between the children, parents and teachers as to what the best route is to whether to learn Braille as well as large print. And usually there'll be some agreement as to how much time is invested in learning Braille. But certainly for adults who are only used to print, it can be a difficult task to learn Braille from scratch, especially if they have issues with finger sensitivity and so on. But it does lend many advantages. So now I'm going to switch to some other technologies. Can zoom in here a little bit. The first one I'm going to mention is about the use of telephones. And we will generally find that a lot of our customers will be quite proficient with iPhones, not just for telephone conversations, but also for social media and apps, sometimes navigation apps to help them with their navigation. And that is really wonderful. This has been tremendously liberating for people. Just the versatility and the power of iPhones and even Android phones now. So, and though I'm not going to be talking about that today, it is of course something that it's been tremendously liberating for many people. But there are some people who struggle to use iPhones for various reasons. Sometimes it's because they had very poor touch capability. They can't swipe and tap with the right level of precision. And that could be owing to another disability. Or it could be perhaps a cognitive thing that just iPhones are too complex for them. So we do have a new phone which will suit some people because it's more than just a simple dial-out phone. It's called the Blind Shell.
11:35.
And it does not have a touch-sensitive screen. That is just a display screen for people with low vision. But you do not need to look at the screen because everything is spoken. So when I'm dialing a number, every number I press is spoken out loud. But more importantly, if I'm doing text messaging or something like that, and of course text messaging is huge in our lives, not just our normal lives, but in our work lives too, it's all spoken. So what I do is I just press a button to go into a simple menu.
Call 1 of 7.
And I have options for calling people.
Messages 2 of 7.
And everything is spoken, just as it would be on a JAWS computer. Now, if I want to do something with messaging, I simply confirm.
Write SMS to contact 1 of 6.
And everything is simply described.
Write SMS to number 2 of 6. Write SMS to multiple recipients 3 of 6.
And the thing about this is that it gives people who maybe won't be using the power of an iPhone, but need some of these more advanced things like text messaging and so on, and in a much more simplified system, but it gives them access to those more advanced features. And that's possible because of the straightforward menu system. Once you've learned one menu, you've learned all of the menus. So this blind shell phone, we think, will have use for many people who would struggle to use an iPhone but want some of the power of an iPhone. And we've already done, Rebecca, a webinar on this particular thing, so people can actually go back to the previous recording of the webinar if they're interested in this particular device.
Yes, yeah, we have.
Other devices that are text-to-speech that are used both at home but also in the workplace are the Orcam family of text-to-speech devices. So the Orcam family are highly portable text-to-speech devices. They do not require a connection to an iPhone or to the internet or anything like that. Their primary purpose is to read documentation, signage, and electronic digital information as well. So we have a wearable version called the Orcam MyEye Pro. And when I say wearable, it is because it clips to spectacles or sunglasses just on the side. And that can then, you direct your face at any signage or documents that you wish to read, and you can just tap the side of the Orcam, which is on the side of your glasses. It will take a snapshot of whatever's in front of it and then almost instantly read that back. So you can imagine how powerful that would be in a workplace where documentation lands on the desk, paper documentation, and you want to quickly see what it is. You can just simply look, face it, tap the side of the Orcam, and it would read top to bottom the contents of that documentation. Similarly, if you come across a doorway and you're wondering what that sign is that's actually been pasted to the door, you can face the door, tap the side, and it will read the signage that was written in that space, which could be something like, you know, closed for lunch, back at 1 o'clock. So that's very useful information. Or it could be street signage, it could be signage within a building, it could be electronic information.
Okay, version 9 is ready. Battery is 85%.
Perhaps on an iPad, perhaps on an ATM, perhaps on a shop front display. So the Orcam can read both digital and print information. It cannot read handwriting, but most of the materials we're talking about today are to do with print rather than handwriting. The other thing that the Orcam My Pro can do, and Rebecca, I think there was a pre-question about that, wasn't it, about the difference between the My and other versions?
Yes.
So the other thing it can do, apart from reading text and digital text, is it can recognize people's faces and announce their name as they approach. Now, this can be very, very powerful for people working in teams, or perhaps who have support workers or interact with people all the time, because you can pre-program those faces so that when that person approaches within about 8 meters, the Orcam will announce their name. And this is silently in your ear, because the Orcam speaker is close to your ear. And this will give you a heads up as to who's coming. So that will help people in a social sense too. But you can imagine in a meeting, when you're sitting in a meeting, somebody enters the room and you discreetly know who that person is before they've sat down, because oftentimes, as we all know, people do not announce who they are when they enter a room and so on. So this gives a little bit of a heads up and can make for more natural interactions with your colleagues. Now, the important thing about that is the information is not transmitted to the internet. It's not recorded and it cannot be reproduced. And that, in many workplaces, is of tremendous importance. So for privacy reasons and security reasons, it's very important that devices like this cannot reproduce photographs or transmit information to the internet. And that's one of the reasons why the Orcam My Pro is preferred in workplace situations, including school situations, where people might be concerned about photography, because the imagery is not actually reproducible or transmittable. Other features of the Orcam My Pro include being able to read barcodes, recognize colours, and currency, Australian currency too. All of the features can be controlled just with a tap or with a voice command. So it's possible to just use voice commands to operate the thing, which makes it much more usable, where you're otherwise encumbered, you've got a cane or a dog or so on. It just makes it just so much more practical. Now, another version of the Orcam Read, it's about the size of a marker pen, and this device has the reading functions of the Orcam My, but not any of the other functions like face recognition. So the idea is you hold it like a pen and you aim it at the paperwork or signage, press a button, and then it will read everything it can see in its field of view back to you through the speaker here. It can also be connected via Bluetooth to Bluetooth earbuds and so on. Okay, so these will give some personal access.
Version 9 is ready. Battery is 90% charged.
It would have been possible to do some of those text-to-speech functions with an iPhone and an app. And that may well be the most useful way of doing it, but you just have to bear in mind that in some environments, it's not really very acceptable to be taking out your iPhone and appearing to photograph things or people. So that's where the Orcam range can be more discreet than using an iPhone. And of course, many people, as I was saying before, struggle to use iPhone apps and so on. So the Orcam will be a simpler to use way of accessing printed materials. So the next thing I'd like to talk about is tactiles. Now, tactiles are raised diagrams that assist blind people to understand layout of rooms and so on, and also perhaps of diagrams of equipment. So there are various ways of producing tactile graphics. One would be using an embosser, and I'm just going to put the camera on an embosser here. So this is the Mountbatten Tutor, and it has paper, it takes paper and it can emboss normal Braille, or you can actually use it as a dot printer to send tactile images to create a raised bumpy dot image. So what frequently people will have is they may already have an embosser, a Braille embosser, and they may not be aware that they can use it to generate tactiles as well. Another way would be to use a new device called the Tact Plus. The Tact Plus is a printer and connects to normal Windows computers. And for any diagram that's on a Word document or a PDF document, it can be printed onto the Tact Plus to create a raised line diagram. So we put special paper in. We go to the print menu in Word, and we just printed this printer here, the Tact Plus printer, and it generates a raised line document. Now, what I've done here is I've got the same document, but I just rubbed some carbon from a board rubber onto it, just so it's a little clearer to see. So for those of you that can see this, we now have a raised line diagram. Now, this was a map, and the advantage of being able to generate a map is, let's say, for example, that you have been assigned to a new work location. It's possible then for the employer to develop a quick diagram in Word, print it from the Tact Plus embosser, and then you can explore your locations here and routes to various facilities and so on. You can use Braille labeling as well. And it's just very direct. It's what you see is what you get. So the employer can simply draw the tactile using normal drawing tools in Paint and so on, and in the Word drawing tools, and very quickly generate a tactile from the Tact Plus. So this could be a personal device. It could be one that you could use at home, and also I remember just speaking with Danny about this earlier, that he felt that it'd be very useful to use the Tact Plus to create diagrams of equipment like iPhones and so on. So when you get an instruction manual, you can actually print out the diagrams of the device, and then that could be felt and understood alongside the text. So I'm not sure whether we have Danny on the line.
Yes, we do. We're trying this set up. Can people hear Danny if he talks?
Hello, can I be heard?
I can't.
Okay, hang on a moment. Oh, that's
Can you now?
Can I be heard this time?
Yes.
Okay. This is a really, really dodgy way of doing things, and I do apologise, Peter, to you, because this has been one thing after another has just gone wrong this morning. So did you want me to answer anything specific, Peter, or did you want to keep going, or how do we want to do this?
Well, first of all, I think if there are any questions from the floor for you, Danny, or me.
Absolutely.
Are there any in the chat there, Rebecca, at all?
Yeah, I'll just have a look. Okay, so we've got a question about, are there any recommendations for people to use apps or software to learn to touch type?
Yes. I've got a couple of recommendations there myself, and Danny may have some others too. We have a program called Typeability, which works with JAWS, and it's a full typing tutor program, from knowing nothing to being completely proficient with the keyboard. It includes exercises to develop skills, and it's definitely something that's generally used by younger people, like children at school, but could be used by anybody of any age to learn how to touch type. Also, there are various online typing tutors. Typing.com have one, which is a free typing tutor online, and most of them are online. But not all of them are accessible or for people who are totally blind. Danny, did you have any comment on that?
There used to be one, and I'd need to check, number one, whether it still exists or whether it's even still available. There used to be one available for Windows PCs and it was just called Typing Tutor. Now, that was not screen reader specific. And as far as I'm aware, you didn't even need a screen reader. I'm pretty sure that one was self-voicing, but I would need to check whether number one, whether it's still available or whether it even still exists. I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Yeah.
Okay. We have got a question for you, Danny. Can Danny describe how he integrates all the different equipment in a typical day? I'm interested to learn how time is consumed and allocated. Did some equipment take more time and effort than others?
Well, look, for my personal, we'll speak to a work day, then I might sort of go a little bit further into stuff I use outside work as well, because there are some things that I do use that we haven't demonstrated today that aren't necessarily quantum products. So my main working is a laptop with a copy of JAWS and also a copy of another program we haven't spoken about called OpenBook, which is used for scanning and character recognition for different things, and also sometimes a Braille display on top of that. That's really dependent on what I'm doing. I'm one of these people who has my speech cranked up to a ridiculous level because I've been using talking computers since about 1984. And I've just got so used to listening to it at really super high speeds. Now I can do that at a far, far higher speed than I can read Braille. I'm actually quite a slow reader when it comes to Braille, but I can take in information incredibly quickly with the speech side of it. So for my work, that's really about it in terms of equipment. I don't use really much else in terms of specialist technology at all. There's not that much that's sort of needed. My work phone is an iPhone XR with voiceover enabled. And of course, all the usual apps and bits and pieces on there that we generally have with email and other stuff like that. Now, for my home setup, what I use outside work, I have a couple of extra devices. I have one which is no longer available, which is called an ID Mate, and that is for scanning barcodes and things like that with groceries, so cans of food or packets or boxes or whatever it happens to be. Unfortunately, that device is no longer being made, although I think they're still around. You can still get them, but I don't think they're being made anymore. My personal phone, I have an iPhone. My television talks, I have a Samsung TV, which actually has speech built into it as well. I'm just trying to think what else.
Could you maybe... Yeah, sorry, carry on, Danny.
That's all right. Look, there probably is other stuff as well. Not thinking of it off the top of my head. It's things that I use all the time, so I don't really think about them all that much.
Yeah, actually Mike's come up with a question and I had another one. So Danny's he's asked, could you explain why would you want to scan barcodes? I guess what information is that going to give you?
Go into my pantry. I live alone. I'm totally blind. I use a seeing eye dog. I live alone. If I go into my pantry, I have two identical jars. What's in them? So that the barcode gives you that information. It actually tells you what it is you've actually picked out of the cupboard, or cans of food, or cans of drink, or whatever it happens to be, without having to open them and figure out what it is. That way, the barcode reader can actually tell me which product I've got.
Yeah. So yeah, it's not just reading the barcode. It's
It actually does tell me what the product is. I probably didn't explain it well enough. The ID Mate does actually have built-in speech. It's a handheld device that has built-in speech, and a database of about 7 million barcodes. That includes regular updates. They get all of the barcodes from Coles and Woolies here in Australia, and I think IGA as well. Aldi doesn't seem to pass them on, but which is a pity. But anyway, for some reason they don't. So most things you will find, unless it's a really new product, then you'll find that it actually does come up. Now, if it is a new product, I can actually record me saying what the product is, at least until the next database update comes out and it's put in there.
Yeah.
And that is also available on the Orcam My Eye as well. That feature to
the so on the Orcam, there's also apps on the phone that'll do similar things as well. There's a lot of different sort of ways of actually going around of actually doing that. Now, the reason I got the ID Mate even though I do have a phone and I'm quite a decent user of that, is because what I was finding, especially with older ones, is that the cameras on the phone were not that great at actually finding the barcode. You really had to know where it was, whereas the ID Mate's got a much bigger scanning area and it tends to find it pretty quick.
And just Mike sort of said, why would you do the barcode? So for example, the Orcam would read text, but sometimes if it's a really strange font, or sometimes if it's a curved item, it can be harder to get the whole text, so you might actually get more information quickly. And it might say depending on what they've saved in the database, it might have like the weight amount or more specific information just quickly. So
and the other advantage of using barcode readers like the Orcam or the ID Mate is that you can print your own barcodes. You can label things with barcodes and use audio labeling with the device like the Orcam to label things with audio. And I think that has an application in the workplace too, where you might be able to barcode your own shelving systems and so on. And then just by looking at the barcode, you could have your audio description of that item or that shelf or that document folder.
The other advantage too of using something like the Orcam or the ID Mate is purely because they don't need an internet connection. You'll actually find on your iPhone or Android device, the vast majority of barcode reading programs, the vast majority of this type of software, needs a data connection for it to work. The database is not stored locally on your phone. Whereas with things like the ID Mate and other devices like it, it's all stored internally within the device. You do not need an internet. The only time it uses the internet is to update itself, and the Orcam's the same. The only time it uses it, it's for software updates, and that's it. Yeah.
And Mike's suggested maybe identifying clothing as well, because you can get washable labels, I think, as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
So if you want to know what you've got.
I was wondering, Danny, whether we were going to talk a little bit about how you get to work and what technology you might use getting to work. I know you have a guide dog as well.
Well, really, the only technology I use there is a little iPhone app called Move It, and the only reason I use it is because people in Melbourne would know that a lot of our buses have announcements. Now, some of the time those announcements don't work, and there are also some bus routes that don't actually have them at all. So where our office is in Melbourne is on a very long, very, very big, long, busy road with with no indication of when I'm there. There's no corners beforehand. But, the nearest corner is 5 minutes away. So there's no real indication of when I get there. So this little Move It app is basically a GPS app, and it just tells me when I'm coming up to my stop. It's as simple as that. It's nothing fancy. It knows all the bus routes. It knows all the train routes in Melbourne, and it works for a lot of other cities as well. I'm pretty sure during the setup process, it figures out where you are and gets what it needs to get. And it works like that. That's in terms of technology for getting to and from work, that's it. I don't really need anything else.
Oh, that's great. One other thing I was going to ask is, originally we were going to try and demonstrate this, but how you deal with, people, as you do tech support, tend to send you screenshots of information, and how JAWS can help you. Like, it's got tools there that might be able to fish out the information.
It does, yeah. There's actually two ways I can do that. The first thing I do is JAWS has a feature built in called Convenient OCR. Now, for people who don't know, OCR stands for Optical Character Recognition. In plain English, what that means is that you send a picture of whether it's a screen or whether you've taken it with a scanner or a camera, whatever it happens to be. You send a picture at this software, it looks at the picture and says, can I see any text in that picture? And then decodes it, gets all the text out of it that it can see, and throws that back into wherever you want it to go, whether that's a Word document, whether it's in a separate window, whatever it happens to be. So JAWS has that capability built in. Mm-hmm. If that doesn't work for some reason, because JAWS's capability on this, it's not limited, but it's basic. So if for some reason that doesn't work, then I can throw it at a program called OpenBook, which I mentioned before, which is designed to work with scanners and different devices to be able to actually scan entire books and all sorts of things like that. OpenBook has a lot more options available to be able to make sense out of this type of thing, and in some cases, it can do a better job. I'm actually finding that's less and less necessary these days, because the character recognition and software in JAWS is a lot more up to date than it is in OpenBook. So what I'm finding now is that I'm using JAWS probably 9 out of 10 times, and OpenBook maybe 1 in 10. Yeah. But for that type of thing. But look, I do like to have both options there just in case. Nothing wrong with having a second option.
Yeah, no, that's for sure. Couple of other things. Joanna's asked, how does the Orcam work when you may have difficulty aiming your gaze? Did you want to speak to that, Peter?
I can speak to that, yes. It's a very good question, because we often find that people who lose most of their functional vision later in life have often acquired some habits of where they direct their gaze, because they may have a chink of slightly better vision in one side of the eye. And so you'll often see that when they're trying to look at paperwork, they'll bring it close to their face and they'll twist their head slightly so that that slightly better chink of vision will be trying to read. But because that habit becomes very ingrained, if they do lose all of their sight, they still have that habit when they're trying to face a document. And of course, what that will mean is that if they're wearing an Orcam, that they will be turning their gaze away from facing the document. So what we try to get people to do is just to consciously hold the document so they know where the document is. They use their hands and their arms to identify where that is. And then consciously direct their nose, not their eyes, their nose, to where they think the center of the document is. Then, when they're squared up that way, and they may need to raise the document or turn their head down as well, that's when they take the picture, which is just a simple tap of the side, and it will read the document. So for documents that you can hold, then that gives you the sense of where you should then adjust your face to aim. For things that are at a further distance, of course, you can't actually know precisely where they are. Or perhaps a person, you're trying to do the facial recognition on a person, you sense there's a person in the room. So you're going to have to acquire those skills of using your ears to detect where they are, and then squarely face them by moving your head, not your eyes, towards the center of the object. So the same happens if you're using a cane and you're going up the footpath and your cane taps onto one of those A-frames that advertise the wares of the shop that it's just outside of. Again, you've identified where the print is, you've hit the A-frame, and then again you direct your gaze, your face downwards, and square it up with the document before you tap the side of the Orcam. But I have heard some people say that they've been told that the Orcam's not appropriate for blind people because of this issue of not being able to point. I haven't mentioned this, that one of the features of the Orcam is the ability to point with your finger directly at the text that you want to be read out loud. I haven't mentioned it because we're talking primarily about people who are functionally blind, who there's no point pointing because they don't know what they're pointing at. So for people who are totally blind, it's all about getting the object within facing the object, the document, and then doing a whole of picture tap so that it reads from top to bottom.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that answers the question.
Yep, that's good. We did have another one when we originally from the registration form that was asking about how people can access things like there's LED screens on a lot of printers in the workplace and things like that. I don't know if you've had experience, Danny, trying to found ways of accessing that. Sometimes the Orcam will read things, but it just depends on the contrast.
Unfortunately, there's not one fits all solution to that type of thing. I've used a couple of iPhone apps to do it, and they do an okay job at it. But the problem is if you have screens that have multiple lines on them, and only one line changes, then it becomes a problem. You also have the problem if you have a screen with buttons around it with labels on them, that it tends to read the labels on the buttons. It basically what these things are designed to do, and the Orcam's saying, what these things are designed to do is they're designed to pick up any text they can possibly see. Yeah. So if it sees a whole bunch of buttons with text on them, say something, I don't know, maybe like a number pad, it's going to read you that whole number pad as well as whatever's on the LCD. Unfortunately, I haven't found an easy way of doing it, and if anybody does know of an easy way of doing it, I'd love to hear it. Because it's been something that I've been looking for a long time.
And by the time you found a solution for this particular printer or fax machine, they'll be out of date, and you'll need a different approach for the new one.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And the even bigger issue now is that a lot of these devices are basically a touch screen.
Yeah.
Which, unfortunately, unless you can control it from the software on your computer, which in a lot of cases you can, but if you're in a workplace, you may not necessarily have all that software installed for security reasons and all the rest of it, because then you'd start changing settings on the printer, which obviously they wouldn't want. Unfortunately, if you're looking at a device which is touchscreen controlled, I hate to say it, but you're sort of out of luck, unfortunately. There's not really much that can be done about it.
I suppose if like the buttons were close to the edge and didn't change that much, you could put tactile markers around the edge or something, and have a tactile diagram layout. But it's pretty tricky situation.
If you have a device that's touchscreen, that might be a touchpad, but the buttons are static, which means they don't move. They're actual physical buttons under the touchpad.
Yeah.
Then putting markers and stuff would work, but a lot of the cases now with the stuff that's menu driven, you're literally touching icons on menus, and it's just that unfortunately they're just impossible.
Yeah.
So Danny, are you finding now today that you're using? I'm thinking of things like money. Are you doing a lot of stuff just online to pay with Pay ID, or are you doing NFC type tap to pay for coffee and stuff like that? Is it getting easier or harder to do this?
Mostly tapping my card, or the other way of doing it, obviously, if you have an iPhone that has that feature built in, is you can obviously do it with things like Apple Pay, which pretty much everywhere that has an FPOS machine accepts that. The big advantage with that is that it really doesn't matter what type of FPOS machine they have, whether it's a touchscreen one or whether it's got a physical button on there, because you've already cleared it using the Face ID or putting your password on your phone. So you actually don't need to type in anything on the actual FPOS machine itself. Or I use cash, which is getting rarer and rarer.
Yeah.
All right. So, Rebecca, are there any other questions from the floor?
Not that I've seen. Has anyone got any other questions? I think we've covered everything that was in the chat. So yeah, thank you everyone for attending. If people were interested in and thank you Peter and Danny, and thanks for managing the technical issues we've had today. I'll just share my screen and just share our contact details. So yeah, if people are wanting demonstrations of the kinds of equipment that we can have, or want further information, there is a lot of information on our website, quantumrlv.com.au. And we've got a 1300 number, 1300 883 853, and we've got consultants all most of the way around the country, and we cover all states between us. So yeah, we can be put in touch with your local consultant, or email info@quantumrlv.com.au, and yeah, we can arrange to demonstrate things. And I think we are planning down the track to have a bit more of information, hopefully, on job access, and have another webinar that's will include some other people from different places, hopefully. So watch this space for that. So thank you Peter and Danny, and thanks for everyone for attending. So we'll talk to you next time.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye.